Hello, X. Well, it's been a while. 2.5 months, if you want to split hairs. A long and arduous fuck-off journey south, once again, by yours truly. If you want really detailed and scientific write-ups of what's been going on here, I'll post some links to those later for those that are interested in the science side of things. I'm just a lowly crew member, so I'm not really up to speed with the serious side of things. Since a monumental administrative fuck-up within P&O Australia, resulting in the loss of 2 offshore vessels from the fleet, the future of many of its seagoing employees was left in the lurch. Many redundancies were offered, and a few others just simply quit, as I will explain later. Seeing as I was a casual employee, with no permanent work roster assigned to me, I was not even really considered. I rang up the office after my last job on an offshore ship to find out when I would be going back down south. They told me that I was no longer needed due to their errors. Employment terminated. So, I was quite upset, having looked forward to heading to Antarctica again. So I assumed I was never to return. I rang up a fellow shipmate off the Antarctic vessel and found out what was going on. He informed me of what happened, but also told me that he was intending to quit, and if he did, he would pass on my number to take his place. A few weeks later, just as I was running out of money and was about to leave, the P&O office rang me, asking if I would like to do a 9-week voyage back on the Aurora Australis, the Antarctic vessel. I happily obliged, although wary of the fact that it was a 9-week trip. The longest I've ever done at sea was 8 weeks, and that was pretty torturous, and even then, we could still get off in port. 9 weeks on the Antarctic vessel means 9 solid weeks in a floating tin can, pushing through ice and being as cold as fuck just about every other day. Nonetheless, I agreed to do it, and I thanked the aforementioned fellow for putting my name forward for me. I was quite excited to be getting back on and heading south again. The purpose of this voyage was marine science, or SIPEX-2 to be precise. Google it if you can be fucked. Sea ice and physics experiment 2. Basically, a bunch of scientists from all over the world, from vast backgrounds of marine science factions, to study the behavior and nature of sea ice around the Antarctic coast. Also were some microgeochemists, atmospheric scientists, krill and photoplankton biologists, and a range of other schools of science that I can't really think of right now. In all, a complement of about 70 science personnel on board, along with us, the around 20 ship's crew to help them. After saying goodbye to my girlfriend and spending the last few days with her, which were hard, knowing that I was going to be away for a very long time, we set sail at about 10 p.m. on the 14th of September, leaving Hobart, Tasmania, Australia, and punching line into the surprisingly calm and welcoming Southern Ocean. It was about a week and a half before we started seeing ice. First, it's just the occasional mammoth iceberg, ranging in size from that of a large house. Other big broken off chunks of glaciers, as big in size as stadiums and beyond. After a day or two, or more, the further south you go, you start getting sea ice, which is a frozen layer of ice on top of the water, relatively thin, and doesn't bother the ship too much. Then you start getting into pack ice, which can be extremely thick, up to 6 meters, but we try to navigate through stuff about 1 to 3 meters thick. The ship makes light work of it, but the thicker it gets, we have to back up and start ramming through just to break through it. The ship is double-skinned and rated well for icebreaking. The last survey that was done on the ship showed that it had held up really well over its 23-year career so far, and a dry docking is planned mid-next year to refit it and hope to get another 10 years of service out of it. She's old, but comfortable, and a trusty workhorse with minimum problems in general in the running of things. Once we got to our first ice station, the ship stopped, jammed in, and parked up against a heavy floe of ice. Some field training officers from the Australian Antarctic Division were first off onto the ice, a bit of an ice floe about 2 meters thick. Their jobs were to get onto the ice first, set up perimeters and safe zones that were certainly safe for people to be working and walking on. After a couple of hours of walking around and putting up flags marking no-go zones, thinner, more dangerous ice, we would get off, start loading shipping containers onto the ice, holding the science equipment, and the scientists would start dragging their sleds all the way out with all the necessary gear that they needed to do whatever it is the fuck they do. Another job we would do is drill holes into the ice about 100 meters away from the ship and drive pegs into it and run mooring lines to the pegs so that the ship was effectively fastened to the floe. After all this is done, then we would move and start gearing up the 2 helicopters we take down with us. One helicopter was fitted out with a range of sonar, radar, and photography equipment. The camera alone, which was mounted on the underside of the helicopter, I heard cost about $50,000. It was used for the purpose of aerial photography, some of which I'll post later. The other helicopter was purely a search and rescue helicopter. One helicopter is not allowed to fly more than 5 miles away from the ship, unless there is another helicopter to accompany it in the event of a crash. This is all due to a French crash that happened down there a couple of years ago, where everyone died. And I think from memory, they said that the search and rescue helicopter crashed as well when they were looking for them afterwards. Ice Station 1 was quite eventful. On the first night, some scientists and a couple of our crew were out on the ice at nighttime, about 10 p.m., and the ice started cracking up. About 3 people were stranded on a bit of floe that was slowly moving away from the ship. We went into rescue mode, and all was sorted out quickly. An inflatable bridge was put over the crack, and the people had to crawl back to safety. No one was injured, unfortunately. This whole trip, I've been wanting someone to fuck themselves up, so we could go home earlier. Ice Station 1 was abandoned, and we moved to find more suitable ice. Basically, the next 7 weeks or so are more or less the same. Everything happened like clockwork, and I think in total, we did about 8 or 9 ice stations, each station ranging anywhere from 1 to 4 or 5 days. Maybe more. I don't know. I stopped counting after a while. I have to apologize for the lack of photos of good quality, as I really wanted to push myself to raise the standard of my photos on my SLR, so the SLR photos are probably more arty than anything, and everything else is just, yes, I'm sorry, Instagram shit off my phone. Nonetheless, you should get a good idea of things. The wildlife is always my favorite part. This trip, I was lucky enough to come face to face with some emperor penguins, which I've never seen up close before. Usually we just get Adelie penguins. In hindsight, I think Adelie penguins are cooler. They are smaller, but really cute, and have heaps of character. They're funny little things. Emperors are like twice the size, and have a slow staunch shuffle and a weirder sounding quack that kinda sounds like some dumbass trumpet. They are pretty inquisitive. They will come right up close to you, but we aren't allowed to touch them. But if they touch you, it's no big deal. At one time, we had Adelies and emperors all walking around our site. It's funny, they don't seem too interested in one another. At one point, a suit of about 100 Adelies were jumping out of the water onto the ice, and a bunch of about 4 emperors were chilling on the ice right next to where they were coming out, but they didn't even flinch. Again, more footage later. Also, this trip, we saw a few crab-eater seals. The first one I saw started shuffling right for our ice station. I have some footage of it. I'll try and post later. It was obviously distressed, having come just out of the winter and probably starving and trying to find a hole in the ice to get into so he could go and break his months-long fast. Shame that there was a hole that we had drilled for the ROV that he went straight past and didn't even see. The coldest it got to down there that I saw was about minus 37 degrees Celsius, which is cold, especially with no humidity, so it just stings the shit out of you. Your eyelashes freeze up, photo later, and your snot in your nose gets all ice and shit. It hurts to breathe, it hurts your eyes, and if you try and wear snow goggles, they get fogged up, no matter how hard you try to keep the heat from your breath getting to them. There were some pretty cool photos of some people with all their hair frozen, but I didn't get them. After acclimatizing to it all, it can be around -10, maybe -15, and you can walk around in just your work overalls and not be too bothered unless you're in wind upwards of 15 knots. Then the shit happened. We were due to be home on the 5th of November. The Voyage leader was pushing for us to get further south and west so that they could study the ice down there. They were told it was pretty risky, seeing as the ice was so thick. Nonetheless, we started making our way there, and I think it was around ice station 7 or 8. Some pretty bad weather closed in and compacted a lot of ice around the ship, meaning we were pretty well cemented. After about a week, they decided to celebrate by having a barbecue on the ice, which was a cool novelty, but I was pretty over it by that stage, so I just had a steak and stole a heap of beer and went to my cabin and got trolleyed. After, I think it was 10 days, it was apparent that we were going to be late home, so the captain decided that he was going to start smashing his way out, no matter how hard it was. It took about 2 days to break the ship free of its stuck position, and then it took another 3 days to move the ship 100 meters. In total, it took us about 10 days to break out. At about day 7, a lead, cracks in the ice, started appearing about 800 meters ahead of us. They also used the choppers to do recon flights to assess the ice ahead of us for navigation purposes. After a few days, it started widening up, and it took us 5 days to move the 500 meters to the water. We made it just in the nick of time as the winds changed and started closing it back up again. That was painfully slow and torturous. Every day waking up and seeing that we hadn't moved hardly at all. The next day, we got stuck again in a tiny little bottleneck in a lead that took a couple of days to break through as well. It's kind of worrying sometimes when the ship actually gets stuck on the ice, like is beached, and the ice under the water acts like a suction cup and holds the ship to it, and you will have to run the engines full steam and then full ahead to try and wriggle the ship off. You never know when it's going to happen. It could take hours or days. You never know. You just have to wait and pray. The thing that was happening to us is the ice was drifting south, so we'd be steaming north slowly for about 13 miles and then get stuck, and then drift with the ice back south about 13 miles. So it was like getting stuck on an escalator going nowhere. Quite painful. So, after navigation through really thick ice, we were finally out of it and into the lighter sea ice, making better speed. By this time, we were told we were going to be about 11 days late, which it has worked out so far, but our navigation equipment had been getting interference and the signals were in reverse for nearly 10 days. We were heading back further southwest. Something like this had never happened to the captain or anyone else before, and it panicked a few of the crew, as this was the longest most of the more inexperienced crew had been out on the sea in these conditions. We were unable to reverse the signals on the nav equipment or find the source of interference. When we tried to travel in the complete opposite direction, it would tell us it would flip again, and it ended up confusing the shit out of anyone who tried to fix it. Our communications and satellite phones were struggling to work, and our situation was getting worse. We decided to keep pushing through the thin ice in the direction we thought was Hobart, Australia. We sent the helicopter up to check for signs of weaknesses in the ice, and one of the pilots noticed a green oasis in the middle of a clearing, filled with trees, waterfalls, and animals. He said there was like a pyramid-like structure with cigar-shaped drones flying all around it. Once the pilot landed and told us the story, we were all thinking he was crazy and told him to take his meds, and we all called him a schizo and bullied him mercilessly until we arrived back in Hobart. We talked to the trip organizers of what the pilot saw, and he was never allowed to come with us again. We effectively didn't associate with him anymore and told all of our mutual friends that he was mentally ill. I think he went crazy or jumped off a bridge after that, but yeah, one crazy adventure. Huh. Listen, dude, if I keep talking about it, I won't be able to go on another expedition. It's best for everyone if we just end it there. We all have a journey to fulfill, and if you're smart enough to work it out, then I will see you there eventually. Good luck, bros. All the best. Z. Okay guys, take my post as you will. I have been refraining from posting this for some time, even back in the older days of Antarctica on Axe and Paul several years ago. I figure that now is as good a time as any. I stopped myself from posting because I fear gang stalking or being traced if there was any truth at all to what I'm about to post. Now I just think fuck it. This post will likely go unnoticed anyways, and gang stalking is just another irrational fear for myself. My knowledge of Antarctica comes from my best friend of 50 years now. Though we grew up together, we grew up in very different conditions. He was part of the rich family who owned one of the largest factories in my hometown. I was the opposite, just a naive kid playing around town when we first met. We were best friends then, and I still consider him my best friend right now, despite him traveling around the world, going to Princeton, and doing whatever he wanted. The point is, he is a 31st Mason and has lived a life way beyond what I can imagine. Despite all this, he always came to visit, sometimes several times a year, sometimes not for years, but when he does, we usually get smashed and trashed, hookers and blow. He even brought me DMT one time, and other crazy shit. Okay, enough backstory, time for the goods. This comes from him. His story has not changed, though he only told me this roughly 5 years ago, and told me that shit would be happening in less than a decade. This starts with religion, and at first I rolled my eyes, but as he talked about it more, it sent shivers up and down my spine. So, the Masons have been in charge of controlling and releasing information to the public at reasonable levels. This is what he told me the majority of his Masonic duty entails, and the first piece of media that they altered was the Bible. A major part of the Bible was cut out from the Revelations, revealing where the Antichrist and the beast would emerge from. He said the section that they cut out was the most important. Okay, so the Revelation stated that the last Antichrist would be the total opposite of Jesus, spreading disease from an old age, which turned most humans into zombies, or some weird shit he said. Anyways, he said this Antichrist was trapped in a frozen wasteland with magnificent buildings and was being held captive by kilometers of ice. He doesn't know exactly if this is an individual. Even the Masons think this is a virus of some sort. The Bible did not specifically state, but he said this is where the saying comes from, when hell freezes over. Hell is already frozen over. Once hell is defrozen, then real hell will be unleashed. He told me that these temples in Antarctica have been explored by a group of people in control in the government. The same group is doing crowd control methods all around the world, have been digging, hoping to find this Antichrist buried in Antarctica because some believe it is the key to immortality. For another small section of the Bible did refer to the everlasting life, Garden of Eden, being hidden right beside this Antichrist, and in order to bring about the last days, it had to happen anyways. So teams have been digging, blowing up shit, covering up, stopping visits, though he said you can visit the outside portions of Antarctica. Only those who know will ever get to see those temples, and constantly destroying any information leaked from this expedition. He told me, several years ago, some Russian thought that he found a potion of immortality and injected himself with an ancient virus that they discovered in a vial in one of the temples. He even cringed when talking about the story, and said that the guy instantly turned blue and froze over. Everyone ran out, and when they returned, his body was gone. Now they only work in those giant, radioactive suits. He said that they had to replace him with a body double to avoid drawing notice or some shit in his real life. He went into great detail about how big and complicated those temples are, and he calls it a big giant city that expands across the entire continent. He said, from one temple area where you enter, there are hundreds of rooms, hallways, traps, all types of symbols and shit on the walls, large books of ancient text that no one can read, vials upon vials of random liquids which they can't even remotely identify, but he said that most contain living organisms in these vials, and they are protected behind large traps, shit like from Indiana Jones. He said that they've already lost over 500 people from exploring, and now they are using robots. But shit is so complicated because you have to move blocks to open doors, solve riddles, I don't know. He said it's truly a giant mousetrap. There are keys and legends on the walls, and a single room can contain up to 100 different keys for solving to open a trap. It's crazy shit, and they have the smartest people working on it, and they send in third world people to go and open the doors when they think they've solved it. It's shit I still don't know what to make of. So, some other stuff he told me. Most movies and books are representing what they think will happen when it is discovered. Like Transformers, with the frozen bot, forget his name, all these zombie movies, and all this other shit in the media. I'm not sure if you guys care. Essentially, I have crazy stories from him for all these years. A lot of examples I forget because of our drunken binges, but this is just the gist of it. Don't know if it confirms anything for you, but it's just my 2 cents. Just for you, Anon, I will type out everything I know. He said Game of Thrones, one of the only shows I watch, so I can relate to what he said, shows what they think will happen when they discover this Antichrist. They aren't sure it is, but the White Walkers are meant to get normies ready to fight against the possible zombie outbreak, and why they think it's soon. A quote he kept repeating from the Bible was, "After the War of Wars, and after the Winter of Winters is when everything would happen." He thinks the War of Wars was from World War II up until now, non-stop fighting across the earth, and the Winter of Winters refers to the ice of Antarctica decreasing and opening up parts of Ireland still frozen. Another crazy fact he said they know is there will be Jesus, or Christ, right beside the Antichrist, and you will get to choose when it is first discovered. You think it will be 2 vials beside each other, and you will have to drink one. After the Russian, they put in a ban from ingesting any shit in these temples to prevent anything from happening. It's truly a clusterfuck of arguments, because everyone wants to be the first to keep discovering, but they are in disagreement of what to do with all these random vials they keep finding. He said each other has random living organisms inside of it, and it's bacteria and viruses we have never seen before. Shit which makes apple rot in minutes, a monkey explode diarrhea and shaking to death. But the coolest thing he said was there is a frozen, giant skeleton in golden armor in one of the temples holding the skull of a giant reptile which looks to be over 30 feet tall, the giant, and the reptile's head is roughly the size of a van. It is incredible to see and unbelievable. He mentioned some Jewish TV show called The 100. I haven't seen it, but he said the leader takes a chip or drinks something which gives them the recollection of all the knowledge previously and lets them control the others with their minds. This is what they think is in the immortality vial, so the media and shit that they keep releasing is just them theorizing everything and making entertainment out of it. It's funny, because it's the truth in a way, he said, and the public just eats it up. One long binge, he did tell me everything that they found so far. It must have been hours he was talking, and lots of shit just went through me, because it was so unbelievable. Aside from the traps, the walls are covered in symbols and images, shit which has supposedly happened before, shit which hasn't happened, and shit just no one knows what to think about. He said these images, though drawn in some ink which looks like it's printed on a piece of paper, has predicted many events recently. And the Illuminati card game, this piece of 4chan I do enjoy threads about, were actually pictures on the walls of these temples. He said they look so lifelike, even though being drawn. They had to release them in a game because these events were coming true over time, and they keep doing so, which is scary and crazy. For them, it's just another piece of media which flies over the heads of the population, but for them, it's a giant timeline. He said there's tons of shit hidden in the media which they find and subtly hide, but it doesn't matter to anyone because we just keep consuming shit and not caring, nor would we care unless we saw it in real life. I was amazed when he mentioned this game because I actually own it and took it out, and we played for hours. He explained a shit ton of cards which happened, and cards which they think will be happening soon. He said each and every card is a picture from the wall, and nothing is made up. He said the card game is a giant timeline leading up to the end or discovery of Antichrist. Every time they open a new room or different section to the temple, it is littered with more images. He mentioned a shit ton of other games, movies, shows, books, and other stuff which they hid, but I can't remember all the names. They aren't sure which ones are going to happen next, but they constantly hide these hints in TV. Even for them, it's like a giant mess of information that they are constantly working on. He said the pictures are one thing. There are hundreds of books and scripts which contain shit that no one understands. He educated me on the Voynich manuscript in one of the books which they found and made its way into the public. No one knows what it means or anything, but they think it was ancient methods for making medicine or other stuff that no one actually knows. He mentioned like 9/11 was in the temple several times, and they did attempt to prevent it, but somehow there was a group in the government which made it happen because of interests. They even hinted on The Simpsons and several other shows that it was coming, but the public can't make connections or believe anything. He says the more shit they release, the less likely the majority of the population believes. Instead, they focus on working, shitting, eating, and making money. It's just nothing but entertainment. This is what he said. He said there is a connection between how much shit from the temples they put into the media, the more likely it is to be successful. Even the symbols, which are littered across all media, Illuminati symbols, come from these temples and other temples from the world. But in these temples, they appear hundreds of times in random order, like a language, so they just throw it out into the media, and we buy it up. Not even they know what it truly means, but they just keep filling our media with it, and we just keep consuming it. They have no idea whether these stories happened or will be happening either. There is no order in how they appear in the temples. It's all scattered, so they are scared that there are beasts hidden deep down in the temples. Another interesting thing he said was you cannot look through the walls. So normally, he could use imaging and radar and other technologies to map out temples. These ones just appear as one giant black blimp with all technology that they attempt to use. They are literally mice in a mousetrap, making their way through this maze, piecing together lots of info and hoping to get lucky. The amazing part he said of the temple is how complicated it is constructed. From the 500 people who died, 400 are still missing. So the puzzles and shit you do to open doors actually open up traps where you fall into or some shit, and those 400 have disappeared into the temple somewhere, and not a single one has been found yet. They fear they have become infected with a zombie virus, for there are symbols showing death all over the temple. But they fear, once they reach a certain level, they will find all those lost in a weird state, dead or infected or something. Also, there is no noise in the temple. When you talk, it's a very flat tone, and there are no noises outside. It's like a dead silence, which makes it really fucking scary to work in. Most of those who are deciphering will not ever enter the temples under any circumstances. That's why they send the third worlders to go in and try and open shit up. Yeah, he said it looks incredible, like a man holding up a dog by its tail. It's almost the full length of him, but the skull is huge. He said all the most important stuff has been removed. They kept the fluff, which keeps people calm and going to church. Everything in the Bible is true, with many parts missing. He actually mentioned that Noah's Ark was based on Antarctica, and they expect to find some evidence of it once the snow melts. A part he mentioned was that the Antichrist was at war with God, and that is why he got frozen. But he said God isn't what we think he is. He's not a man, but a living organism, capable of hive mind-like thoughts, which can see the future. So God, the spirit hive mind, warned Noah of the flood ice age coming, but didn't warn the Antichrist. I don't know, because it went over my head as he was talking, but he said that these two have been at war for a long time, and humans are just the vessels which they use. That is why Christ and the Antichrist will be located near each other, and he said the Matrix told the story as the blue pill and red pill. One will be the Antichrist and bring about death, the other will be life, though he admitted they have zero clues as to which is which. and where they are in the temples. There is a giant power struggle in those working on the temples, because many are offering to be test dummies, thinking they will get immortality, but many are scared of what will come about. I don't know Anon. I'm trying to recall word for word what he told me, and I'm doing my best. He said it's like, the body is the temple or some shit. He said you are what you eat. Like, you consume a virus, and it can control you without you knowing. That is what he was trying to tell me, the Christ and the Antichrist were. And that is why Christ actually translates to body. So Antichrist is anti-body. Something which goes against us. I don't have the answers you seek, just some information from what is going on.